Whether you're picking and grinning or just grinning, grab a drink, pull up a seat. It's time for Roots Music Rambler. Turn it up. All right, Frank, we have been to a lot of shows this year. I've been to a lot. You've been to a lot. We see a lot of acts live. We've seen them in big venues, small venues, little crusty bars, and probably some buskers on the street elsewhere. Getting close to the end of the year, by the time this episode airs, will be toward the end of November. So it's probably a good time to start thinking about what are the best performances we've seen in 2024. I also want to start going through the exercise of top albums, top songs, etc. But we'll kind of throw that out there this episode as a challenge to everybody else here in a minute to help us figure that out. But in terms of live performances, who have you seen this year that are on the tops of your lists?
Well, I don't know that anything or anyone could beat the Tyler Childers experience, the one at United Center that we were at together. That was just mind-blowing. Like, I don't throw that term around loosely, but it really was an entire experience. And I will have everybody know that I was absolutely sober. I had no drinks or anything else. So it's not like my experience was enhanced in any way, except for Tyler and the multimedia show that was going on and his band, of course. They're always top notch. And we talked about this too. I've seen Tyler a half dozen times over the years, and this was unlike any other Tyler show I've ever seen. And I think you said too that you were a little concerned because you don't know how he could ever top this. Like, this is like peak Tyler, right? But I have faith in him. I do. But I will have to say that was the top performance of the year. Tyler Childers, supported by S.G. Goodman at the United Center in Chicago.
I concur. That's my top performance of the year as well. And you're right. When I was walking out of there, I just thought, I'm concerned for Tyler Childers and his fans because I don't know that he can top that tour. The Mule Pool tour was fantastic. I happened to see it again at the Gorge a few months later, and it was just as good. The first time I saw it, obviously, is going to rank a little higher and a little bit better because it was the first time I saw it. The Gorge is a fantastic venue, but, you know, going with you and Tom and Karen and being there with S.G. Goodman, and it was just everything about that event and that night was fantastic. And then the performance itself was just incredible. And I really and truly, the next time they go out on tour, which I'm assuming the Mule Pool tour is probably winding down for this year. I know they've got dates on the calendar for next year, but I don't know that it'll still be Mule Pool. He's probably going to be coming out with another album, knock on wood, hopefully soon. And then there'll be a different kind of tour. But until they have to, I wouldn't recommend redesigning that tour because it's fantastic. And I really am concerned that there's no way to top that. I mean, obviously they can rethink what they present and whatnot, but it was just so good. Yeah, just an experience that I wish everybody could have seen that night, and I wish everybody could experience it at some point because he's definitely at the top of his game. That was a fantastic performance. And I would rank that not just my top thing that I've seen in 2024. I would rank that easily in the top 2 or 3 I've ever seen in my life. It was really good.
I think that's fair. And I got to see the Mule Pull tour. That's very difficult for me to say. I did get to see it again just a few weeks later after we saw him in Chicago. I saw the same tour up in Milwaukee at Summerfest. The only difference was there was another supporting act, Adeem the Artist, who I really enjoyed. I like Adeem. I like their music. But that was a completely different experience. It was outdoors. It poured rain, and I was extremely alcoholically enhanced.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So let's talk about some others. Like I was kind of going down my list of trying to kind of rank them top 5 or whatever. And Marcus King at Railbird was kind of game changing for me in a lot of ways. I was a Marcus King fan before then, but he went from an artist I enjoy to one of my favorites in an instant. Because when you see him live and see how talented he is playing that guitar, and when he plays the organ, it's fantastic. And his voice is incredible live. So that was probably number 2 on my list this year, was Marcus King at Railbird. And then I think I've told everybody the story at least once on the show about seeing Joy Aladakun at the Gorge opening up for Tyler. She had something bad happen that day. It had been a rough day. There was a weather delay in the concert. It was kind of a miserable day, it sounded like, for her and her band. And she played angry that night. And when an artist does that, it's either the worst thing you've ever seen on stage or it's the best thing you've ever seen on stage. And for her, it was the best because she absolutely shredded the guitar, figuratively and literally. She actually Pete Townsended the guitar and busted it on stage. She was just intense and angry. And I don't know that everybody in the Gorge that night clued into it. But if you know anything about her and you've seen her before live, which I had, you were like, oh my God, this is different level. And so that was fantastic. And then, of course, I saw Sturgill and Ruparina on his new tour, and he's doing 3.5 hours and doing a bunch of covers, and he just gets up there and plays his ass off. And that was fantastic. And then to round out my top 5, Jason Isbell and the 400 unit at the Ryman is, they've got a couple albums out from that experience. And I actually did get to see them last month at the Ryman. And that was really fantastic. We sat on the front row of the balcony, so we didn't have anybody standing up in our way. We could take all the pictures we wanted, and he's just fantastic live anyway. So those are my top 5. And then I've got a bunch of like others that we could get into if we want to.
Sure.
What rounds out your top 5?
Oh boy. Let's see. So for performances, a couple of my favorite shows from the year were William Prince at Space in Evanston. I went with my friend Lindsay, and we were right up in the front. And if you've ever been to Space, or if you haven't, it's a very intimate room. And this one was a seated show. So Lindsay and I had seats right literally in the front. Like I had to crane my neck and look up at William Prince because we were so close. And that may have added to the experience, but his voice is so powerful. And when he started singing, like I shuddered, like not in a bad way, but I was like, oh my goodness. And it was one of those few experiences that I've had where I could feel the song and the music and the words. And it was a really uplifting, powerful experience. And so there was that. And then American Aquarium also at Space. And that was a different vibe. It was standing room, and I went with my friend Michelle, and they just rocked. I mean, and BJ, he can tell stories. I posted in our nerd Facebook group, the music group, that BJ Barham can rival Patterson Hood in the storytelling department.
Nice.
Very different style of storytelling, but just the lore. I mean, he had Michelle and me snot crying. And then, so there's that. But the music too was outstanding, right? They just rock.
Yeah.
And who else? Oh, Hermanos Gutierrez. That was a very unique experience. I'd never seen a show like that before. Just 2 dudes on a stage playing guitars, instrumental. You know, they had some stuff to say in between the songs, but it was like I was kind of in a trance, and I had no alcohol or anything else. So that was all natural.
That was the group that you said going in. They played panty dropping music. Is that what you had?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that. And then
got one more to round out.
One
your
more.
5.
Okay. One more. Oh boy. Okay. I'm going to have to go with Carlos Nunez.
Okay.
He's from Galicia, Spain, and he plays the bagpipes.
Nice.
And if you know anything about Galicia, it's considered like the Celtic corner of Spain. So it's not unusual for this Spanish man to be playing the bagpipes. And he also plays the gaita, which is an indigenous flute type instrument. And I'd seen Carlos the first time I got to see him was at Tradfest in Dublin, Ireland in 2019. And I was just blown away. I went into it having no idea what to expect. And like you said about Tyler's Mule Pull, that show stands as one of the top performances I've seen in my life. So when I found out he was playing here in Chicago last month, I was like, I got to go. I don't care that it's a school night. I don't care that I have to drive an hour each way to go. I don't care that I'm going by myself. And I went, and it was just as amazing as the first time I saw him. So if you have not heard of Carlos Nunez or don't know anything about him or the type of music that he plays, I highly recommend it. And if you have the chance to see him live, don't miss it.
Nice. I love it. The other thing that I was thinking about as I was trying to think about who my top performers of the year were, and you actually probably named off a couple of these versions on your list, but I was trying to think of who are the people that surprised me. Who are the acts that I didn't really expect would be good, but were good, or I didn't know anything about and they blew me away. I saw Marcus King 3 times this year. I saw Joy Coon twice. I saw Tyler twice. So I could do a top 10 list of just my favorite artists. But I thought, okay, who on this list probably is a surprise? And probably the number one surprise on my list was Allison Russell. I saw her at Railbird and she was amazing. She is incredibly intense and creative and fun and tells stories and uplifting and dances around the stage. I mean, she and her band, the whole experience was great. And I did not know what to expect and thought she was absolutely fantastic. The other one that really stood out, actually, there's 2 more that really stood out. Robert Randolph and the Family Band. I saw them in Indianapolis at I Made Rock and Roll, which is the first time I saw Joy as well. But he is kind of like the Eddie Van Halen of the pedal steel. And it was mind blowing to watch this guy play. And the band was fantastic. Good kind of soul, a little bit of blues, a little bit of funk, a lot of mixtures of music there. But Robert Randolph and the Family Band was really outstanding. And then the other one that popped for me was a band I saw on a 6, band venue at the Burl in Lexington. And they're called DOG, Deeohgee. It's 3 guys who it's almost like a psychedelic rock, kind of like a Cream reimagined for the, 21st century. And they can just play their asses off, and they had good songs and they were really lively. And the main singer guitarist was super interactive with the crowd there, which is hard to do when nobody there knows who you are. And I just really thought they were fantastic. Great live show. Their music's pretty good too. And so I thought they were good. And then the other person and the other band, I'll just throw this one out there just because it just so happens that another band that was on my list of here are people that surprised me or new bands that I discovered because of live music is Kindred Valley, who we're talking to today. When I saw them open for Britt Taylor back in February, I immediately, as soon as they started the first song and started singing, I was like, wow, these guys sound really good. And then I started paying closer attention to the lyrics of the songs, which we'll get into in the interview today. And I came away from that thinking these kids are going somewhere. Like they're really, really good. They're just a really good band. So I'll throw them out there too. Other than the ones you've already named off, anybody just kind of surprised you come out of left field this year? We feel like, oh my God, that one's good.
I was at the Fitzgerald's American Music Festival for 4 days and saw so many different bands, like new to me bands. So some that were surprising because I just didn't really know anything about them. I'll go with Them Coolie Boys.
Okay.
And they're this like bluegrass band out of Wisconsin, and Magnolia Boulevard.
Yes. I love those guys.
Which I know you're familiar with them. I had no idea what to expect from that band, but it was very, very good, very enjoyable. Then at Evanston Folk Fest, and I know I talked about this individual before, but John Mook, the singer-songwriter from Uganda, and Willie Carlisle also at Evanston Folk Festival. And I knew Willie's music. I'd just never seen him live. And it was very entertaining. He kind of gives off this like preacher, like big tent preacher kind of vibe. But I guess the kids would say it's ironic because he's kind of poking fun at that whole situation. But it was very enjoyable and I appreciated a lot of what he had to say. So I guess in the surprise / new to me performances, I'll go with those.
Very nice. That's a good list. So we would be very interested in hearing who you, the listeners out there, saw live this year and who impressed you. So jump in the comment section of one of the posts or whatever on the social medias and just let us know, hey, I saw this band live this year and they were great. We'd love to know because if we haven't seen them, we want to go see them. So it'll be a great help for us. So jump in there and do that. We'll also get into another thing I want you to help us out with here in just a second. Welcome to Roots Music Rambler. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
And we're rambling on through the stories behind the music we love.
And today on the show, Jason already mentioned, we are talking to the fellas from Kindred Valley. So today we're talking with Blake Lacy and Noah Freeman. Jason has mentioned them a couple times on the show, and he saw them, as he said, live back in the spring. They are continuing to grow in popularity, putting out new music, which just sounds so great. And we wanted to grab them and dig in a little more deeply into their sound, their roots, and more.
Yeah, that's right. I saw him, as I mentioned, at the Burl back in February when I went to see Britt Taylor. My daughter went with me, and it was really kind of cool because we got to be able to talk to them a little bit. They were the opening act. And so once they got done and Britt and her group were setting up, they were kind of milling about. And Blake, who is one of the two folks we're going to talk to today, his parents were actually manning the merch table, and I went back and talked to them. And it actually turned out, I was like, so where are you guys from? They said Huntington, West Virginia. And I said, okay, well, like, really, where are you from? Because Huntington is, it's like saying you're from Chicago, but you're from the boroughs somewhere, Okay. And so I said, well, really, where are you from? They said, well, I'm from down, his dad said, I'm from down in southern West Virginia. And I said, well, you're going to have to be more specific because you're talking about my neck of the woods. And he said, Boone and, Logan County. And I'm like, well, I was born in Logan and, have a lot of family there. Do you happen to know Judge O'Brien? Because Judge O'Brien in Logan County, he's now retired as my uncle. He was circuit judge there for 40 years. And the guy he looked at me really stunned. He's like, I'm like a court advocate or something. I've worked with him for 40 years or whatever. So he knew my uncle. They didn't work directly together, but yeah, there was a connection there. So we made a really interesting connection. As I mentioned earlier, when I heard them play, I was like, well, they're really talented. They're kind of, you could describe them as folk rock. You could describe them as they're not really country, but they're not really folk, but they're not really rock. They're kind of a mix of everything, which is kind of like what we like on this show. I immediately was like, okay, they can play. And there's 6 of them. And in the middle of the show, they like switched positions and everybody started playing a different instrument, confused the shit out of me. Wow. But it just kind of goes to show how talented they are. They've got 3 or 4 people in the band that write songs. And so afterwards, Katie and I, we met Rachael, the lone female in the group. We talked to her for a little while. And then of course I talked to Blake and whatnot. So I got to know him a little bit and bought a record and all that kind of stuff. And I've really wanted to have him on the show for quite a while. And so I'm really, really glad to have them. They actually, about a month ago, they actually were the headliner at the Burl. So in 8 or 9 months, they've gone from an opener to a headliner at music venues like that. They've been playing all over the Midwest and down south and even up north a little bit the last few months. So they're starting to gain quite a following.
Nice. And you kind of touched on it, that they're qualified as like a folk rock band. There's 6 members blending folk country with some bluegrass influences, and the songwriting's really good.
Yes, absolutely. There are several, as I mentioned, there's several songwriters in the group. They have a couple of male leads. And then I mentioned Rachael, who's the lone female in the group. She adds a female vocal lead to some songs and kind of a harmony accent to others. They kind of come across to me as kind of a folkier version of Fleetwood Mac a little bit. If I'm trying to describe him, I'm like, okay, it's Fleetwood Mac, only much more folk music. So we're going to have some fun kind of digging in with Kindred Valley.
Excellent. And then also on the show, we'll do our normal Pickin the Grinnin segment, share our picks for whose music is making us grin. They might be new artists, might be old, but they sure will be good. And before we kick it all off, we should probably start that conversation about our top artist songs and albums for 2024, no?
Yeah, we should. And the reason we're going to start the conversation and not end it is because there's another month left in the year, but also we want your feedback on this. So we would absolutely love for you guys. You can email us at ramblers@rootsmusicrambler.com, or you can jump over to any of our social channels and send us a DM, or you can jump in and comment on anything. So we're not going to make it hard for you. Just reach out to us somehow and tell us what you think about the top albums and the top songs for this year. Now, I made a long list, an exhaustive list of top album consideration. And we're talking calendar year. The Roots Music Rambler gauge is going to be 2024, because if you go by the Grammys and the American Music Awards and all that, or Americana Music Association Awards, I don't know what the hell the parameters are for those damn things, because I just saw a list recently and they still had Tyler Childers in there and all his stuff came out in 2023. So I don't know what the hell they're doing. Anyway, so here are a list of albums and artists who have new music in 2024. So these would be for album consideration. I'm just going to throw out a handful of them. All right. Marcus King, Mood Swings. Joy Coon's Observations from a Crowded Room is just a few weeks old. It's brand new. Certainly, you got to go with Passage to Desire from Johnny Blue Skies / Sturgill Simpson. Trail of Flowers, Sierra Farrell, came out in February. $10 Cowboy, Charlie Crockett, came out, I think, in April. Made by These Moment, Red Clay Strays. I mean, they've been popping up. They're going to be on everybody's short list, I bet. 49 Winchester's new album, Leaving This Holler, if you're into the kind of Southern rock sound. That came out this year. Sarah Jarosz, who wins Grammys, like other people eat Tic Tacs. Polaroid Lover came out, I think, in January. So it's probably the older groove. Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats, South of Here, came out this year. You've got Gillian Welch and David Rawlings. Woodland came out. Beyonce's Cowboy Carter came out this year. So is that in consideration for some honors and awards? John Moreland has a new album this year. Billy String's new album is really good. Both of Wyatt Flores' albums came out this year. He's got a brand new one out, but he also, his first one, Half-Life, came out in April. Hozier has a new album this year. Kimmy Bitter, Leo and Meitzen. Oliver Anthony's record came out in 2024. There's Amethyst Kia, the Heavy. We could go on for days about all the great music that came out this year. What we're trying to do is kind of narrow down and say, okay, who would we put on the short list, let's say 5 or 10 of best albums of the year. And so it's good to start having that discussion now. We'll get feedback from all of you, and then maybe Roots Music Rambler will come up with our first ever, this was our album of the year. Oh, I guess we'll take nothing formal about this. It's basically whatever Frank and I decide is going to be the top album of the year. And
Lord knows we are not formal.
Yeah, but we would love your feedback. We're just two fans of music who love what's going on out there. And then on those albums are there standout songs? I know that for Sierra Farrell's Trail of Flowers, obviously American Dreamer is the song that has been getting the awards. I would argue that's not the best song on the record, but I don't determine these things. So give us that feedback too. What are your favorite songs that came out this year from those artists? So not specific to the list I just threw out there, Frank. Open discussion. Any albums that came out this year that stand out to you as this was really, really good, should be considered on the top of the list?
Definitely. And my list is very different from yours. There's only one, I think, that overlaps. But I want to preface my picks by saying there's so much music that was released this year that I have not even heard yet. Yeah. So please don't come at me if your favorite wasn't mentioned. I can only pick from what I've actually listened to. Okay. So that being said, the one album that you picked, Jason, that overlaps is Sierra Farrell, Trail of Flowers. That is really, really good. And I think I agree with you about the American Dreaming not being the top song on that album. I mean, it's an excellent song. I still love it, but there's so many others on the album that are fantastic. And so who else would I go with? Mind, Man, Medicine from the Secret Sisters. Yep. Those girls, I've loved them for so long now. In my book, they can do nothing wrong. Also, Roadrunner from Caitlin Butts. Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Toe Tappin'. She was my Pickin the Grinnin not too long ago. And I mentioned that she was inspired by the musical Oklahoma to write this record, and it's excellent. And then the other one that I will have to go with is Tiger's Blood from Waxahachie.
Nice. Those are good. Those are very good. I have those on the extended list of the records that I was just looking. I just basically looked at release dates and wrote down everything I could. So you've got, the Avett Brothers had one. American Aquarium's new album was this year, obviously.
Oh, yes.
Of course.
How could I forget?
We had Kaya Cater, Strange Medicine on the show. Yep. Very good. The Johnny Cash Songwriter compilation came out this year. So technically that should be in consideration. Orville Peck, Stampede is this year. But then I go into the specialty categories too, like Jason Isbell and the 400 Units live from the Ryman Volume 2 is this year. So if you're going to consider live albums, there's one to think about. Also, live on Mountain Stage, Outlaws and Outliers came out this year, which is absolutely fantastic. So there's a lot of great artists on there on that Mountain Stage album that's really good. And then the Tom Petty tribute album came out this year, Petty Country. So there's just so many good pieces. Silverado's got a new album out this year. The Deslons are out there. I just listened to Benjamin Todd's new album, which, speaking of Sierra Farrell, he's got a duet with her on that. Shooting Star is the name of the album. I just picked that up last week, and oh my God, so good. I mean, there's just so much great stuff out there. So we want your thoughts on top albums of 2024. The only restriction is it needs to have been published and came out in the calendar year 2024. And then what are your favorite songs from the year? We'll continue this discussion on a future episode, of course, but we'd love to include your feedback as well. So fire that stuff off to us. How about that?
Yes.
Very good. All right, we're sipping on a bourbon and I'm out. So we're going to take a quick break for a refill. Take a moment, if you will, listen to more about the awesome sponsors that help make this show possible, including Muskox Flannels. Muskox Flannels are buttery soft and built like a tank, just like me. You go to gomuskox.com/Rambler, use the code Rambler, and you get a discount. $10 of every $100 purchase goes to support wildlife conservation. So they're doing good for the earth and the animals on it. And they're doing good for you because these things are fan-freaking-tastic. The weather's turning. It's getting cool out there. You need to upgrade and update your flannels. Muskox Flannels will do it for you. Go muskox.com/Rambler. Use the code Rambler. Get a discount. When we come back, Blake Lacy and Noah Freeman, no discount needed, from Kindred Valley, will join us to talk about the band, their music, and more. Don't go away. This is Roots Music Rambler. Hey, gang, I was not a flannel guy until I found Muskox Flannels. Now, I don't want to wear anything else. Well, I mean, pants, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so Muskox is a premium flannel shirt that comes in various colors and styles, but also all season or heavy. So they have different weights and thicknesses. They even have sizes that fit big boys like me. Now, Frank, I hear the ladies like the flannel look. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So one Muskox Flannels customer actually said they are buttery soft, but built like a tank. I resemble that remark, especially when I'm wearing my Muskox flannels. They also, by the way, give $10 of every $100 order to support wildlife conservation. So you're doing some good for the earth and the animals on it with every purchase. Visit gomuskox.com/Rambler, browse the collection, and get you some buttery soft, built like a tank premium flannels. Make sure you use the code Rambler, all caps, and get the discount on your order. That's gomuskox.com/Rambler. Use the code Rambler. Buttery soft, yo. That might be my new hashtag.
You open the door to say, lights were off, I bumped the lampshade, but I never was too bright, never learned to see the light. I've been sweet on you, babe, I can't hide it anymore. I can tell you're something special, babe. I can feel it in my bones. I've heard sanity subtle.
Welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. That song's called Bones, and it's from Kindred Valley's new EP, What Was Left. The song gives you a little taste of this Huntington, West Virginia-based folk rock group, and two of the founding members, Blake Lacy and Noah Freeman, join us today on the program. Blake, Noah, thanks for coming on the show. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing great.
We're doing great and honored to have you guys here. So I saw you back in February opening for Britt Taylor at the Burl in Lexington. We connected there and I've been kind of following along. That was, I think, 8 months ago or something like that. And I think last week or the week before, now you're headlining the Burl, doing shows up and down the Mid-Atlantic, a bit out in the Midwest, a bit down south, road dogging it, but growing the fan base and getting bigger. What's the last year or so been like for you guys? Seems like it's been pretty active.
Nothing short of crazy. I think it's been a whole lot of different, a whole lot of new. We're doing tours, like you said, all over now. We were in Iowa and Chicago a couple weeks ago. I've never been to either of those places before, so that was pretty neat. We got to tour with Tommy Prine in July and go up towards Maine. So it's been a whole lot of traveling, seeing a lot of new places, getting to go back and visit a lot of the places that we already have a lot of friends and relationships built. Really just a lot of fun playing music everywhere, honestly.
Noah, does it feel like you're making it yet, or are you still in that we don't know how long this thing will last phase?
It's minute by minute sometimes. And, you'll be half asleep in the van and thinking like, you know what, this ain't that bad. I'm laying back playing video games and watching television in a van. And then, you start getting a little sore. And then you're like, you know what, this sucks. and you're really making me mad. And I hate the way he's driving. Yeah. And you know, and then you stop at a Sheetz and you get some 2-for-1 hot dogs and it's all back to normal again. So it's kind of, you roll with the punches and you kind of just learn not to get too comfortable with anything, including how you feel at any given moment. If I get the feeling like I made it or like it's time to call it, I usually think that'll probably change here in about 5 minutes.
That's a good attitude to have. I will say that good on you guys, and it's good to be young, because I can tell you right now, this old fat guy would not be able to make it more than a couple days on the road. So do it while you can. Just out of curiosity, I mean, I know you guys have been together for a while, and we'll talk a little bit more about the history of the band here in a minute, but is the end goal here, do you have an end goal to just be huge stars to make a living playing music, or what's the end game, or at least the mid-range game for the band right now?
I think the goal, at least for everybody that we've settled on for right now, is we want to be able to do this and make this our living and not have to rely on anything else to provide our needs in ways of a job. But yeah, we want to play as many shows as we can. And personal goals, I mean, we all have artists that we want to play with and share stages with and open up for. Really, the main goal, I think, is to just make this our main thing.
Yeah. I think along with that, the ability to be able to make it our main thing and not have it be at the expense of other things. I think a short-term goal is to make it our main thing, like our day jobs, and we're slowly getting there. But the long-term goal is to have it be the day job. And that means that like you still are able to walk away from some things. Like right now, you can't always walk away from things. And so there's short-term and a long-term steps to that. Like I think in the long term, it would be nice to be able to call this the main gig, but also that doesn't put like a strain on time at home necessarily or as much.
Well, and I got to ask you this because you've recently kind of encountered a little bump in the road, because I know Caden, you guys recently announced his quote unquote retirement from the band. And so that was, one of your 6 members, a little attrition there. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and where everybody sits with it.
Yeah, I think Caden was willing to give it a shot. And, this past year to really put an emphasis on like how much the band changed. Just in terms of like the scale of the operation, we made an LLC or whatever within like the first month or 2 months of like playing our first or couple live shows in that 2023 year. And that whole year we might have played like, what was it? 30 something shows? Yeah. And we played more shows than that. And like, I think a couple times, 2 months, several times this year. And so it ended up being really demanding. A lot, at least in terms of what we were used to. And we were all working, upwards of 20 hours a week, several of us working 40 hours a week plus. And I think that it was kind of a test for all of us. I was a little worried that I was going to hate it by the end of it. And so I think that Caden just ultimately decided that, being gone that much ultimately wasn't for him. And I think, after getting a tour under our belt, I think we all obviously, we decided that it was for us, but I think we all kind of got it. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like, I can see how if you're not like kind of a little nuts, you might not like this. And Caden is otherwise a very sane and rational person. So I think that is maybe why he just wasn't cut out for slamming in a van with, 6, 7 other idiots and performing to sometimes 3 people in a bar. And so we ended up, kind of understanding. And he really gave it an earnest try. I mean, he went all the way up to Portland, Maine with us and back, and drove all the way back for us while Brett and I just slept in the back. So he was a trooper every step of the way, and he really gave it a shot. But I think ultimately he just knew that it wasn't for him.
And I think also, unlike maybe some of the rest of us, at least myself, Caden actually enjoyed what he did in college. So he's still finishing that up right now, but he really enjoys his degree in that. And after getting to test this out for a while, he's decided he preferred that job and that lifestyle, which absolutely.
Well, again, you guys are at that age where it's a great time to get it out there and get it out of your system, or figure out if it's even in your system.
Yeah.
And so, good for him for being able to, take a step back. That I'm sure takes a lot of bravery and vision on his part. And then it takes a lot of acceptance and understanding from you guys. So glad that you were able to get through that first little bump in the road without, too much strife and stress. So go over with us. Take us through the band and tell us who does what. And I'm asking this question for a specific reason, but tell me the names and the roles in the band, and then I'll tell you why I'm asking for specifics.
Are you asking for musical roles or in terms of what we do in-house?
Yeah,
you can tell me anything you want. Musical roles was the intent, but I'd love to know like how you guys are running stuff too. That's cool.
Yeah. I am Noah Freeman, and I play banjo. Originally was just the banjo player, and then now I play acoustic and occasionally a harmonica for one song. And I do some songwriting and some vocals as well, but that is it musically.
Blake Lacy, I sing, and that's about all I do musically for the band, singing and songwriting, and I book most of our shows, and kind of deal with the logistics side of things. We have Mr. Brett McCoy. He plays drums, and that's about what he does for the most part, but Brett's really good at keeping us on the technical side of song.
He's not giving him enough credit. He runs our bands in town.
That's true. I forgot about that.
If you see our show dates on Spotify, that's because he put them on there.
Yeah.
That's about it, though. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Jaden, he plays electric for us. He also mixes, produces, and records all of our songs. He has his own like side gig doing that for other people here in Huntington and outside Huntington. He's a wizard at music, so we're very thankful to have him. Rachel, she, again, singer, songwriter with us. For one song, she plays the guitar, so we'll see if that expands in the future. And then she also helps run a lot of our social media stuff.
Very nice.
And then I do my kind of role outside of just picking at strings is I run our merch, and then I help Blake out with just kind of whatever he needs at any given moment. Yeah,
are you implying Blake's the diva of the group?
Well, to put it, I know Blake said that he doesn't do much other than sing, but to give him credit where credit's due, he does just about everything else that we don't want to do, which is like making sure this meeting was in my calendar and things like that. He like makes advanced sheets so that way, like if we have questions, we can just go and look like, what time am I supposed to be here? It's the most pampered. It's kind of like the opposite of what you normally expect a band. We have a front man that is just like, he's a servant for sure.
He's your tour manager is what he is.
For sure. Yeah. We're trying to find ways to pass that off on other people eventually. But
sure. As you grow, fortunately, Blake, your job will be, you can morph from the guy running everything to the guy demanding things be run for himself. So that,
can't wait.
It'll switch. Now, the reason I ask that is a couple of times in that show back in February, it was like a quarterback calling a weird shift in a football game. Y'all switched instruments and rotated, and different people played different parts, which is amazing and kind of unsettling all at the same time. Are all of you that versatile? Are you guys like shuffling the deck a lot these days?
So we, for the sake of like keeping a show not full of technical errors and not making half the show transitions, we've kind of made it to where there's only two. We try to keep it to like two switches of instruments for everybody, because we found that like any song I'm playing acoustic, Jaden's probably playing either bass or electric, or not anymore, not bass, but Jaden is probably playing electric on, and then for one song banjo. You know what I mean? So it's kind of easy if I pick up an acoustic, and I tend to write a lot of similar style songs. We kind of keep that energy for the middle of the set, and so Jaden just gets to hold the electric the whole time. Versus if Jaden's on the acoustic, I'll be on the banjo. So we do coordinate the switches a little bit. It's a big mess to keep track of. We were actually trying to explain it to somebody for a recording session not too long ago. And because I said, I'll be here playing this instrument, and then I'll be here playing this one. And it got complicated fast, and it made perfect sense to my head, but I very quickly understood why it didn't to him.
I was definitely impressed watching it back when in February, probably before you guys, minimized and organized things a little bit differently. But I was like, holy crap, these guys are just like shuffling the deck up here. This is great.
And I will say, to Brett's credit, another thing that he does is he's pretty good at making a set list. He usually organizes, and I like the reference quarterback, because I remember we sat down at one point and I was like, listen, dude, you're the only person who sees everything we've got going on. He gets like the full view the whole time. And I've been playing with Brett a long time, and he knows he's been playing the longest with everybody collectively. So, he knows we just trust him to call it, and we just trust that there's a reason. And if we feel like it was stupid, we'll just talk to him about it after. It's good to have someone that you can just be like, hey, what are we doing next? And you know that he's just going to be able to make the decision and call it. And it's usually a pretty good one. So
that's cool. It sounds like every member of the band has some pillar of importance to keeping everybody together, which makes for a pretty damn good band normally. So sounds like you guys are on the right track. Now, I know the two of you handle, I think, most of the vocals. Rachael also has the lead sometimes, but offers a lot of harmonies. And by the way, her voice is fucking fantastic. I love listening to her sing. So, but is that right? Am I missing anybody else who does the vocals?
Jaden will occasionally do harmonies.
Yeah, I think on some recorded stuff, Jaden will jump in on harmonies. And if someone feels like sharing a mic, that, he'll get in there and do some harmonies. Yeah.
That's good.
He's got a great ear for it. It's just we haven't upgraded to 4 mics on stage yet.
Gotcha. So now you guys touched on this individually, but answer this question a little differently. Who writes the songs? Because it's definitely more than the two of you and maybe Rachael. Is that it, or is there more?
On the last project, primarily Mr. Lacy here is full of a lot of his work, and I would say that he is definitely still the front man. That is just because, we have a lot of fun playing instruments, and Rachael has a lot of fun doing harmonies. But here recently, actually, it's been a little more split up, and we've had a lot of fun being more collaborative with it and just kind of having like a community pot for songwriting and just kind of like, hey, I have 2 sentences of this song. What do you think? And I have no music to it. And Brett all of a sudden has a drum part for it. And Jay, it's just like it comes together randomly in a second. And so that's been fun. That's been something that's been more recent on these newer projects and hopefully on the upcoming ones.
That's what we did with the EP that we released, What Was Left. That was probably our first really collaborative work. Like the song you played at the beginning, Bones, that was me and Noah hanging out like right over there over our shoulders. And he was showing me a song he wrote. I think was it a breakup song originally?
Yeah, it was a really bad breakup song. And, just to talk about the songwriting, like we write a lot from personal experiences, and I'm happily married. And so, but I thought we needed a breakup song in our repertoire. And so I showed Blake, I was like, does this work? And all I had that I actually thought was good was Until Your Bones. And I was like, that's something. And he let me down very gently. He was like, brother, I don't think you have the life experiences for this. This might not be in your wheelhouse. And so then, I like old murder ballads, and we got to talking about it, and we just thought that it might be fun to put one of those in our catalog. And I think that that's kind of how it happened. It was a rejection of a previously really terrible song. That's kind of how a lot of them start.
I think that's universal. I think a lot of bands will say that. This started out as a really crappy idea, and then we collaborated and it became a lot better really quickly. So now I said in the introduction to the show when Francesca and I were talking to you guys, I threw out the idea that you guys seem to be kind of a folksier version of Fleetwood Mac with multiple writers, a lot of talent, really nice sound. How do you describe your music to others who maybe are say, well, what do you guys play? What do you sound like? Who are you?
Normally, we'll give them for the genre specification. We'll say we're Americana or indie folk, sometimes folk rock. And then we've been getting the head and the heart a lot lately as some of our comparisons, but we also, camp was a lot in our early days. Back in our early days, like when we were putting out like the first 2 songs, people were like, man, y'all sound like Tyler Childers, because he was like huge at the moment. I don't know that I would say that as much, but probably camp, sometimes the Avett Brothers, the head and the heart, a lot of those comparisons come out.
Know any others for you?
I think he nailed it. I knew that he had those slotted. That's why I went ahead and I referred to Blake. But yeah, I was the contemporary folk, rock folk, indie folk, things like that. We get a whole lot of other categorizations that I wouldn't say are very accurate. But yeah, bluegrass is one of them. The further north you get, the more likely we are to get called bluegrass. Yeah, that's always tough to hear because we're not. I love bluegrass, but we are not bluegrass.
Yeah, well, the further you get away from West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, the more ignorant people are about labeling bluegrass for some reason.
Yeah.
But that's understandable, I guess. Let's listen to some more of that Kindred Valley sound as we go to break. This one's going to stir up some comparisons for sure. Let's go out with Fiddler on the Floor. It's from the band's self-titled album that I have in my personal vinyl collection, by the way. Here's Kindred Valley. This is Rich Music Rambler.
Your mother cries when you talk. You have a robin tattoo, black on the wings, orange on the belly. Don't know what you're gonna do. There's a nectar that's graced your lips. This time It's a weight that you can't see. I'm torn between the road and home. I'm torn by the urge to roam. Either I leave or I stay.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Roses and sacrifice was played, and I swore I couldn't miss you more than this. You walked into the room, oh, you've got all my attention. But what's on your mind? Are we just friends?
That is Come May from Kindred Valley, the beautiful voice of Rachael Hayes on that one. Blake Lacy and Noah Freeman from the band joined me on Roots Musical Rambler this week. So we talked about the band a little bit, but let's dig into how the band came together. I know the two of you and Brett, I think, started the band that eventually expanded to become Kindred Valley. You were the Back Row Baptists or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, that was it.
So how did you guys meet and form and start playing music together?
I'll take it this time. We get to tell this story a good bit, so we kind of just bounce back and forth on who gets to take the lead part. So I had known Brett for a while. I'd known Brett since I started college at Marshall down here in Huntington. And I'd been wanting to make music for a while, and we were both in the worship band at the campus ministry we were a part of. And I went over to his house one night, and we were like, well, this is great. We're making some songs. We're having fun, but I can't play anything, and Brett can play the acoustic. So we were like, we needed to kind of diversify it. And so Brett was like, well, I met this guy the other night at the campus ministry, and his name's Noah. I'll give him a call. And then Noah ended up coming over and buying a banjo from the Home Depot sales booklet. So we made music there for a little while. And amidst all of that, when we were still figuring it out, I mean, not that we aren't still figuring it out, we got a DM from a guy named Jaden Hayes offering to mix our music. He liked our stuff and wanted to kind of get in on it. And it kind of just sat untended to for a while. We spent, I think, every day for the month of November, probably between like 3 and 6 hours together in Brett's tiny apartment, drinking Dr. Pepper,
okay,
and eating Little Caesars. Got real tired of each other. So by the end of 2020, we were kind of like, we'll see each other again at some point. As it got closer to the summertime, wanted to start getting back into music. So I was like, oh, I forgot about that guy that wanted to do some music stuff with us. And he had sent us samples, and one was a song from Caden, and one was a song from Rachael, and then one was some instrumentals from himself. And so we got together, and it was actually, I think it was right after Caden and I wrote Whistle. Me and Jaden started recording that. And then I told Brett and Noah, I was like, hey, we're doing some music. Let's get this rolling. And so we ended up all coming together. And I think it was on a trip to Cincinnati. Me, Brett, and Caden were going there. And we were like, why don't we all just become one big band? Because we were all making the songs and getting featured on them and stuff like that while we were recording. So we made the call. Noah was cool with it. And then Jaden and Rachael said yes. And then it took us another 6 months to come up with Kindred Valley as a name. And in that time, we were just recording songs and working on the album and just kind of working it out and figuring out what we were doing.
Very good. So I know that, we talked about this before we started recording, but I want to kind of go through it. You guys are based in Huntington, West Virginia. Take us through, if you can, where's everybody from? Because normally people aren't from Huntington. They're from somewhere else, and they come to school in Huntington. So where's everybody from? Take us through the roster.
So I am from Ravenswood, West Virginia, which is just an hour and a half north up the river, pretty much. Brett is right in between Huntington and Ravenswood, and he lives in the home of Mothman, Point Pleasant.
Very nice.
So also right on the river. Route 68 is just pretty much it. And then the rest of the band genuinely is from the Huntington, Barbersville area. We have our fill-in bassist, Jagger Smith. He's from the Charleston area. He's a recent addition, but the rest of us are all, as far as the members of the band, it's all, the rest of them are Huntingtonites. And everybody currently now lives here.
So all genuine West by God Virginians.
Yes,
sir.
absolutely.
And I'm allowed to say that. I was born in Logan, so I'm a West by God Virginian myself. In fact, Blake and I were talking actually before the show. I met Blake's mom and dad at the show at the Burl back in February, and actually asked, I said, where are you guys from? And they were saying Huntington area. And I said, well, now tell me where you're really from, because I know West Virginia. And I think your dad said he was from down in southern West Virginia. And I said, tell me where. And he told me, and I said, well, do you know Judge O'Brien? And he said, I've worked with that guy for 40 years. And well, Judge O'Brien's my uncle. So now all of a sudden we have this little serendipitous connection with the band, which is pretty cool. So
yeah.
That's fun stuff. So we went through how the band all came together. The common thread in all this, I think that everyone seems to share a similar background in music, and certainly West Virginia and the Appalachian region's issues and environment comes out in your music. How did you two come to discover those similar musical interests, and how did you figure out that the others shared in that? I know you were talking about collaborating and whatnot, but when it comes to songwriting, you guys have some Appalachian issues that emerge in your music, and that seems to come from a couple different places. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So Blake looked at me, so I'm assuming he wants me to take point on that one. I will speak to that one. I'm a little passionate about it. You know, obviously growing up in West Virginia, everybody in 8th grade, at least as far as I'm familiar, they still teach it. West Virginia history class is a requirement. And I remember back then falling asleep quite often in the class, but the section that I was awake for was part that I think really got me invested and turned me into the kind of history buff that I am now, because we were learning about the 1921 coal mine wars. And I thought, well, that actually sounds pretty interesting, and not just like this law was passed then. And, you know, it was something dynamic and something interesting and something that had lasting impact that happened right here in the state. And the significance of it was not lost on me then. For whatever reason, my dumb 8th grade brain absorbed just that in that class and was primed and ready to receive it. And I also had, you know, the experience of growing up in a town that was also pretty dependent on the industry there. And it's an aluminum plant. Ravenswood is still an aluminum town. And if the aluminum plant were to be gone tomorrow, so would Ravenswood. And I'd say a good portion of that county, honestly. And, you know, they're working on that. There's some other places coming in and things like that. But to be honest, even with those places coming in, I'm not sure if Ravenswood would have the legs to stand on were it not for the industry. And you can see in other spots in West Virginia where the industry did leave and where the industry was coal, those things were gone. And now so are those towns. Those towns are basically nothing. And, you know, the people that are there, God bless them. Some of these people don't have serviceable roads, even internet access, things that we think are just like basic privileges. And you don't realize how much of the daily world has kind of become dependent on these things. You know, these people don't have the internet to order a pizza to their place if their road is frozen over, or to call their electric company if their power is out, let alone if they'll even send someone out there on that road for days, because it's probably bottom priority for the 15 people that live out in that holler. And so West Virginia is really no stranger to industry just kind of taking what it wants and then leaving whatever in its wake. And that aluminum town that I grew up in still has a long history of having a strong union and strong workers' rights that it actually has helped establish in the state. And my dad was part of the union growing up and a proud union member. He also worked at that plant, still works for that plant. And I worked at that plant for a couple of years actually before the band started, in some of the same departments that my same family members have worked in, and some of the same places that people have died in that factory. And not too long ago, just within a couple decades, which seems insane, but it's not uncommon just in America itself. But now looking back, it's no wonder why it caught my interest. And it was during the pandemic, and I was just kind of frustrated and I needed something to be frustrated about. And I just kind of found myself going back over, and it was on the anniversary of it, I think in 2021, or not 2021, it would have been 2020. I started writing and reading more about it just because I got this passion reignited for it. And I only had about half a song written. And it was just that first verse that is still in the song now, and a chorus, I think. Whenever we had formed the band, we were coming up on another anniversary because it would have been a year or two later. And Blake, I played just a little bit for him, and I didn't expect it to fit the vibe of the folk space that we were going for, the softer, more acoustic folk that we were going for. And everybody in the band was really excited about it. And Blake wrote some great verses on it. And that kind of helped inspire me to write then that final piece, the little mini verse there at the end. And that's kind of how the song came together. And if you've been to a show recently, you know I get real carried away with the speech at the beginning and kind of giving like a brief history.
Yeah.
They tell me I'm yapping all the time, but yeah, that's sort of it. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but yeah, it definitely bleeds into the art.
That's exactly what I wanted. And I would tell you that that's 100% folk. I mean, that's what folk music is. A lot of folk music is the ballad of the working man and the ballad of the underprivileged. And so it absolutely fits perfectly in your band. And you can treat it musically however you want, but that's dialed in. And that song, I remember when you played 1921 at the Burl back in February, that song stood out for me. It's like, oh, wow. Like prior to that song playing, you guys were a band that sounded good. And then you played that song and I was like, and they stand for something. There's some substance here. And that's what made me really interested in figuring out more about you guys and following you along. So I applaud you for that song because it opened a bigger door for me in getting to know your all's music. So let's take a step or two back here and throw it over. Blake, tell me where music started for you. I get that when you guys came together, you were in worship band at Marshall University or whatever. And so I understand there's obviously church has an impact and a lot to do with it, but what's your earliest memories of music being something you wanted to do?
Man, so music it's a big thing for my family. My dad's I think it was my dad's grandpa. He would go around to churches in rural West Virginia and teach them how to read sheet music. And he ran a music school. It's been a thing that's been passed down through a lot of the generations of my family. And that same for me. We would go to church every Sunday and we'd sing, of course, at the beginning of service and at the end of service. And then at the school I went to, I was in choir from kindergarten through senior year. So it's always been something I've done. I think the first time I ever looked at music and had an idea that I wanted to do this is my family also religiously watched American Idol when I was growing up. And so I'd see people go on there and they'd get their ticket to go to Hollywood and sing. So that was always like, oh, that's so cool. And that'd be fun to do. And then kind of just went away as I got into middle school and high school. And I was like, well, obviously that's not realistic. And I also didn't think that I just had the skill set for it. And it was just kind of something fun to do. And then got into college and started what I just talked about, hanging out with Brett and Noah, and realized, oh, this is something we could do. But it's always had a big part in my life. Tried several times to learn instruments for one reason or another, just didn't happen. So we're here now, and I sing. Well, that's where we're at.
I'm right there with you, except I can't sing. So, that's why I talk. That's all I know how to do. So
it's working for you.
Noah, what about you? Where did music start for you?
I really credited the first memories that I have. There's a radio station I'm sure it hits a lot more than Jackson County, but it comes in real clear in Jackson County. And it's Big Buck Country 101.5. And they play still to this day some of the best country music you've ever heard. And they play, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, the Oak Ridge Boys. And so I remember hearing a lot of this music growing up, and dudes that were just like guys that look like my dad's friends. You know what I mean? God bless Johnny Paycheck, but he looks like someone chewed him up and spit him out. You know what I mean? So whenever I heard, don't take her, she's all I've got, I was like, and then I saw that dude on the front of it. I was like, well, shoot, that's just the guy down at the Exxon. You know what I mean? And so, and to help with that, my family all were a lot of bluegrass pickers and players. And I grew up with a famous mandolin player. I didn't grow up with him, but I grew up with him as my delivery driver, Johnny Stats.
Okay.
And he would, no joke, show up and deliver a package and then pick you a tune on some instrument that he would have made that night. You should look him up if you get the chance. Johnny Stats, okay. Great mandolin player.
All right. I'm going to write it down. We'll link to him in the show notes. Here we go.
Awesome. Yeah. Johnny Stats. He's just got done playing some shows all over the place. If people have had him open up, you'll find no shortage of good music from him. Excellent. And so there were these people all around Jackson County that just looked like the same regular dudes that I listened to on the radio. They were also really good pickers. You know what I mean? So I was like, well, shoot, there's really not a difference. It's just they're on the radio and these guys are in Meemaw's backyard. Yep. And aside from that, my dad also listened to a lot of classic rock. And nice. So I think that's where it kind of bleeds in a little bit. And so, yeah, it was a lot of family members and then just a lot of like random dudes that were around Jackson County who were just really, really great pickers. And I had enough exposure to see people that way. And I guess enough of them were cool enough guys to where I wanted to be like them and pick up a guitar. So yeah, I would credit just enough positive influences.
That's awesome. Well, we actually, the first time on this show that we talked about the wealth of talent in the mountains was actually when I came down and talked to Britt Taylor for the show at the Burl, because we were talking about how, you know, some of the best musicians in the world are sitting on a front porch in a shack up at a holler somewhere, and they never make it out of the holler, and they don't want to make it out of the holler. They don't care that anybody ever hears their music other than their family and friends. And that's true in West Virginia too. You can go up in any holler and probably find a dozen musicians that are 10 times better than anybody who's got a record deal, which is pretty amazing. While we're at it, let's name off some famous West Virginia musicians. Who you got? Throw out some good West Virginia names. I got a couple in my mind, but you guys go ahead.
You got Kathy Mattea.
Yep. There you go.
Charles Wesley Godwin at the top of his game right now.
He's blowing up. That's good. I like that. You got to throw in Brad Paisley. He's successful.
Yes.
So there you go. Get Brad. Asleep at the Wheel. Believe they are from West Virginia. You guys got to know Landau, don't you?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. He was America's Got Talent winner from Logan. Yep. He's from Logan, by God. Good stuff.
Sierra Farrell.
Yeah. Sierra Farrell. Oh, beautiful. Yes. Good stuff. How about, let's go back a little bit. How about Little Jimmy Dickens?
Yeah.
West Virginian. Red Sovine is from West Virginia. Here's one that most people won't get. Bill Withers.
Yeah.
Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone. He's from West Virginia. And I got two that are completely out of left field. You guys will probably know one of them. But the other one, you probably don't know who Steve Whiteman is. Steve Whiteman was the lead singer of Kix, which was a hair band back in the 80s. But the other one of the most popular and successful Christian rock artists, Michael W. Smith.
Yeah. He's from right down the road, I believe.
Yeah, he's from Canova, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if this man is native to West Virginia, but I know that he is a staple in West Virginia and plays on the West Virginia Mountain Stage. Bob Thompson, phenomenal piano player. Can't say enough about his good stuff. John Ingram is a myth. He's a West Virginia cryptid at this point. I mean, like, that dude is so amazingly good at bass. It's mythical, pretty much.
Good stuff.
He deserves to be in that list for sure.
I love it. So I'm curious, you guys kind of made an allusion to this earlier, but I wanted to kind of drill in a little bit more here. I'm curious if or what kind of impact Tyler Childers had on the music scene in Huntington specifically, because his early gigging was almost anchored there. He's from Louisa, Kentucky. Most of his band is from Northern Kentucky, Western West Virginia folks. I know Craig Burletic, his bass player's from Pittsburgh, but that's kind of an artery connection point up and down the interstates there. What kind of impact, if any, has Tyler had on the music scene in Huntington?
I think it's been massive. I think Tyler was coming up, I want to say it was probably the 5 to 7 years before we ever really touched music. But I mean, so many of the people that we work with now that are established, like managers or agents or anybody, like they got their start around the time that Tyler did and helping out either Tyler himself or like the people there in that scene. And they all kind of learned to do it at the same time. There's just so much more of a music scene now, I think, that I've realized since realizing that like Tyler was a part of that and what that helped kind of awaken in Huntington. And all those people who now have music as their careers, a lot of it as a result of everything that happened during Tyler's kind of come up in the Huntington area.
Yeah, it's still to the point where people will be like, I saw Tyler Childers in this bar. Yeah. Just like, it's kind of like it's kind of like a flexing point within the music community in Huntington. Like, if you're one of the people who gets to say that you were here whenever it was Tyler Childers at the V Club instead of it's the Loud now. That's sort of, and you let people have that. It's definitely felt, because everybody who's involved in the music scene here, like Blake said, they were all people who were also trying to get involved in the music scene around that time. And like he said, we're either helping Tyler or helping people around the same time. And those people are still here holding it down. It's kind of nice to walk into like a pre-established music community, but one that's so new that it's not got all the snakes in it yet.
Yeah. That's cool. I love it when people say, I saw Tyler at this bar, and that about half the people that say that didn't come anywhere near that bar ever, but they say they saw him there anyway.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way that shit works. All right. We got to go to one more break here. We're going to play that song Noah was talking about earlier, 1921. It's from the album Kindred Valley by the band Kindred Valley. Stick around. This is Roots Music Rambler.
Deeper down I dive into the smoke. I trade my life and break my back just to mine some coal. I try to keep my head down and do as they please, but above him veils with a gun on his belt, got his eyes on me. It gets hotter and hotter the deeper we go, and we all go down, but few come up to see you one day more. And the company man will tell you otherwise, but ask any man with a pick in his hand.
Way to eat a tea. You're listening to an ad for PC Game Pass. Want new games on day one like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? How about living out your Sims life with EA Play? We're talking high-quality PC games all for one low monthly price. We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle available December 9th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. Okay, that's the ad. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing now.
That right there is a chart-worthy sound if I've ever heard one. That's Give and Take, also from the Kindred Valley album. Good tunes from our guests here, Kindred Valley's Blake, Lacy, and Noah Freeman joining us on the program this week. Let's get back to the creative process just a bit here. We've talked about multiple writers, creative contributions. How do you guys typically write songs? I know you alluded to this latest project was more collaborative, but is it typically one person brings something to the group and you work through it? Or do you just get into a room and somebody throws out a snippet and you kind of build it? How does that work for you all?
I think a lot of the time, at least experience with the EP that we put out, was we would have at least something, some part of a song, either a finished song or a verse and a chorus or something here or there. And we'd send it in, or we'd come and after practice, just kind of stay late and say, hey, I got this. What do you guys think? And if it's something that we liked, then we'd take a bite at it and we'd work it out. And then I'd add a verse or Rachel would add a verse. And then we'd kind of just build it out from there. And it's kind of like bringing your offerings up to everybody and letting them pick what they wanted.
Nice. So you've got the self-titled Kindred Valley album out, which I have on vinyl. I'm very happy to have that in my vinyl collection. Then you've got the What Was Left EP. Is the title indicative of that being songs that didn't make the other one, or is that a completely different concept?
So that one, to be honest, I was at a conference with school and I was just bored out of my mind. And so I had a piece of paper and we had these songs that we wanted to put out and we had no clue what we wanted to title it. So I was just writing down anything that could possibly seem like it was cohesive with all the songs. And I was thinking, well, we wrote these songs right after we wrote the album. They still kind of fit the themes. They fit the ideas and the sound of the first album. And they kind of seem to give that era a completion. And so I wrote down what was left and then sent it into the group chat, and everybody was like, oh, well, that kind of does seem like it's applicable here and seems like it's pretty good. So I think that is pretty much what the idea of the title is. Yeah.
Nice. Very good. All right. So this episode's going to drop probably the last weekend of your fall tour. So you're just finishing up in the fall. You've had obviously a little bit of a personnel shuffle change here in the last couple of months. What can we look forward to in the coming year, and is new music in the offing soon?
Well, we do have some new music on the way. We're going to be taking some time here just to workshop our next album whenever that comes out. Not giving a date yet or anything. We've had a few incidences where we say this is releasing then and it comes out about a year later. So not giving any hard dates on that, but we do have some other things that we have recorded that are kind of getting workshopped right now, and hopefully we'll be releasing in the next few months generally. And then we're working towards some new songs for the album and maybe some singles and stuff to put out along the way.
Very
yeah,
good.
and you had mentioned towards the end of the fall tour, if you're listening to this around the time that it comes out, we're heading down south for a little bit. Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina.
Both.
We're doing both. That is what I was trying to imply there. It wasn't a question. So we'd love to have you there. We'll be hitting Kentucky a little bit too, because we love playing there. We'd love to have you at some of those shows.
What about tour plans for the spring? Have we already got things in the works, or is that still to come?
Working on stuff right now. Most of January is pretty booked up. Goodness, I'm trying to think of where that is.
We're heading out further west than we ever have. We do that every little tour. It seems like the last time Chicago was the furthest west that I had ever been. And so we're heading, are we allowed to say how far we're going?
In February, we're heading to Texas.
We are heading to Texas.
So we'll be there at least. We have one day booked there right now, working on a run of shows with some guys down there. And
love it.
Excited for that. Never been to Texas, so it'll be pretty fun.
That's great. Well, I have a feeling your music is going to be very well received down there. They love their music, and they certainly love good folk and roots and singer-songwriter stuff down in Texas. So good stuff. All right. Where can people find yins on the interwebs?
If you search Kindred Valley anywhere, it's Kindred, Kindred Valley. You can spell that, I hope. It's Instagram, Facebook. I believe our TikTok's up and going right now.
We are on Bands in Town.
If
you're interested in subscribing to get notifications about those, you can go on Bands in Town and you'll get it. I believe that there's a function to even add it to your calendar when a KV concert is coming up. Spotify also has all that. We have kvband.com, also has merch. It has all the links for those things, as well as some t-shirts, and we have vinyl up on the store there as well. So you can, if you can't make it to a show, you can still get that stuff shipped right to your place.
And we just got in new CDs for the EP that hopefully we'll be able to put up on our store here soon, and working on our merch game for this next year too. So anywhere you're looking for updates or new anything from us, that's where it's going to be at.
Excellent. We're going to put links to all that stuff in the show notes for you. You'll be able to find this episode at rootsmusic.link/Kindred Valley. If you're looking for all those links to the other places, of course, Kindred Valley on the Instagrams, YouTubes, and all that good stuff. You can find them on Spotify. Ben, Noah, so great to have you guys on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of this big thing, blowing up and everything to hang with us. We appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're going to go out with a proper mood song from the band. This cut's called Hope. It's on the Kindred Valley LP. The Pickin the Grinnin segment is next. Stay tuned. They are Kindred Valley. This is Roots Music Rambler.
Listening to that. That was the worst. So we run through it again? Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking for hope, but my pockets are empty and the prices are high. Oh, it's a slippery rope. When my eyes are closed and my arms are weak, 'cause I ain't known truth in days. Come and drink with no fee. Come and feast, it's all for free. Come and drink with no fee. Come and feast, it's all for free. Come and drink with no fee. Come and feast, it's all for free. Come and drink with no fee. Come and feast, it's all for free.
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
Welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. Love having Kindred Valley on the show. If you have not seen them live, if you have not heard their music other than what you just heard throughout the show, please check them out on Spotify. You can go over to their website. We've got links to all that stuff in the show notes. They just released their latest EP, What Was Left, on vinyl. So I dialed that order up right away because I've got their first one on vinyl. So this is one of those bands I'm just going to collect all their records and hopefully never drop off, because they sound great. They write really good songs, and as you could tell from Noah and Blake, they're a lot of fun to hang out with too. So Kindred Valley, go check them out. It is time for our Pickin the Grinnin segment. This is where Frank and I pick the music that's making us grin. It's our way of saying, hey, if you haven't heard of these folks or these songs or these albums, go check them out. It might be a new artist. It might be an old artist, but they will sure be good. And so I'm going to start off this week, Frank, because when I went over to the Monarch, the music community here in town a few weeks ago, saw a young man there who is from Louisville, but now lives in Nashville. He's writing songs and stuff in Nashville now, playing that music city scene. His name is Oliver Sayani. He's Gratuitous Bends, Bends, on Instagram. And he did an acoustic set at the Monarch a couple of weeks ago. And I just thought, this kid's got a lot of talent. He writes really good songs. Sounds good. I was able to talk to him for a few minutes before and after the set. Oliver Sayani is my pick. Good stuff. He doesn't have a whole lot out there, so follow him on the Instagrams, but keep an eye out for that name. I think he's in a band or two as well. So Gratuitous Bends on Instagram. We'll make sure links are in the show notes so you can find him. But Oliver Sayani is my Pickin the Grinnin this week. Smart kid, writes really good songs, great performance down at the Monarch, and I was felt lucky that I got to see him. So that's my pick. What you got, Frank?
Nice. Well, what I got is not in the roots music space at all. And this pick is kind of inspired by recent shopping trips I took with the teen to some record stores and whatnot. But we visited one record store that it was new to me. And the music that is featured there is kind of more like urban, like a lot of house music and stuff. And then there was a bin of like 80s new wave, I think was the title. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go check this out. This is probably the only thing I'm going to be familiar with in here. And it was like tons of New Order. Okay. And New Order is one of my favorite bands going all the way back to high school. And basically New Order, the Substance album, was the soundtrack of my high school years. And, you know, my 4 years of high school were almost 100% miserable. So it's like the one fond memory of high school that I have. So after our shopping experience, you know, in the car on the way home, I was just jamming to New Order. And then I fired up some others that are in that same vein, you know, Depeche Mode. And then last weekend, Tom and I were at one of our favorite joints nearby called Rock Island Public House. And it was right before Halloween. They were having this new wave dance party. So there was a DJ there and he played New Order and all the other stuff that goes along with it. And I was just in my element and having a fantastic time. So New Order for the win, for the happy memories.
Very nice. I like that a lot. And not too far off the path of what I've been, not necessarily voluntarily, but not necessarily, I'm not anti either, but I've been subjected to a lot of music this month from, The Cure has a new album out, and that's like one of Karen's favorite all time. Actually, the night that this episode drops, we're going to see Morrissey in Indianapolis.
Oh.
So been listening to a little bit of that as well. Been a little slow dive in there, been playing some tunes on FPK that are in that whole kind of boot gazing kind of, genre of British rock. I've been listening to a lot of stuff in that vein lately, and, I'm not complaining about it. It's all good. It's not the kind of music that I gravitated to back then. And so I'm learning it really for the first time. I've heard a lot of the songs, but I never got into it. I actually told Karen this morning, we were talking, she sent me a video of Robert Smith from The Cure from, back in like 1982. And this is the Robert Smith that I fell in love with. And this answer to this question is the reason that I did or whatever. So I watched it and I was like, well, I can tell you in 1982, I was 9 years old. And so had I seen that at that time, that was about the time in my life I decided that I didn't believe in, nor did I care to know anything about vampires or zombies or any of the fake fantasy goth stuff. So I would have taken one look at Robert Smith at that point and been like, yeah, not interested, dude. Not that he was a vampire or anything, but, with the goth look. And so I would have not been interested in that at all. And so now I'm going back and I'm listening to the lyrics and I'm listening to the music. I'm like, I kind of missed this. This was pretty good. And so it's been good. It's been good. And I mean, just because of this podcast alone, I've been expanding a lot of my musical horizons.
Same.
So it's been a lot of fun.
Yep.
I'm actually interested to see Morrissey in concert, provided that he shows up, because he has a kind of history of not. But we'll see. It'll be fun. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week, folks. Roots Music Rambler is a production of Falls and Partners, copyright 2024. Our theme music is Sheepskin and Beeswax by Gentacorum. Join us online at rootsmusicrambler.com. Make sure you mash that subscribe or follow button so you remember to join us for the next hoedown and throwdown. She's Frank.
And he's Falls.
Whatever you do, kids, ramble on.